Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Alright, today we're going to be talking about sociopathy, particularly because so many people love to kind of identify with being a sociopath these days, and I have to tell you, the concept of not being able to feel human empathy is absolutely mortifying, and I feel like a lot of individuals who identify as sociopaths are not equivalent to the individuals who are actually sociopaths. Now, let me break this down a little bit for you because I don't want to just automatically go like, oh, I'm a therapist. Oh, I know all this stuff. Oh, this is just my personal perspective on things that I've seen and the odd romanticism that goes down with certain mental health issues or certain things that can be either stigmatized or concerning to humanity and or by humanity. And this regards things like psychopathy, sociopathy, and other mental health disorders like schizophrenia and things like that. I am generalizing and I am kind of blanketing all of these things together, but they are all incredibly individualized and not willing to be taken any bit like foolishly. You should take them all seriously. But regarding sociopathy, it is literally just the fact that you as a human cannot feel empathy. Now, this is kind of an interesting concept because empathy is so complex. To be able to feel what someone else feels, to comprehend it and explain it, and or to display it as just a mere feeling of you can feel empathy or not, is really difficult to do. And I feel like we as individuals, particularly those that dwell online or have really bad upbringings, perhaps with really screwed up like pasts, we have a very difficult time, whether it's due to being desensitized or having some sort of abuse in the past. We can't really easily kind of adapt and or kind of comprehend our emotions well due to us having some sort of emotional stunting in the past. When it comes to things like sociopathy, I feel like we have a very screwed up perception of it, and for some reason, younger generations have some idealization that not feeling empathy is cool. In reality, I have a very poor comprehension of empathy. I feel like a lot of us do, and this is why it's so easy to identify as a sociopath. When you have a very poor upbringing where you can't easily connect with individuals on a human level, you might easily find yourself in the wake of identifying as a sociopath. When you are capable of feeling empathy, you just haven't had the opportunity to feel it yet. So, when it comes to things like empathy, I would say it's really difficult to just understand, and I feel like having sociopathic tendencies doesn't even make you a sociopath. This is not to justify anyone with sociopathic tendencies, by the way, and this is not to kind of play like, devil's advocate for anything that goes against human rights. And also, this is not to justify individuals who are identifying as sociopaths and or cannot feel empathy and then using those lack of feelings to justify abusive and or brutal behavior to other individuals on planet Earth. The thing I have to mention though is on the basis of recollection, I've had a difficult time connecting with many individuals in life because I've had a very weird upbringing. I feel like growing up on the internet and also not having a good ability to be understood by other individuals or experience what they experienced has me have a lack of understanding of the conceptualization of empathy. And typically, I always try to apply the conceptualization of things like sympathy and or just giving perspective and grace to individuals more than empathy. If you have the ability to feel things like pity, sympathy, anything like that, and also to gain general perspective and understanding of how somebody may feel given a circumstance, it doesn't mean you can feel empathy, but you can simulate the feelings of empathy. And the only time I've ever been able to recall feeling empathy, which is not to say that I'm a sociopath, I really do not believe in the concept of identifying as a sociopath or saying that you're even sociopathic. I think you need a legitimate diagnosis from somebody who is actually able to diagnose you to even identify with some level of sociopathy. But I feel like it's very common for us to just not understand empathy well because it takes a lot of human feeling, and people who have really torn, screwed up pasts and or people who grow up where they're emotionally closed off to people have a difficult time in general feeling things for other people, no matter what the circumstance, empathy or no. Now, I have a beautiful recollection of the first time I can actually note feeling empathy and understanding that this is empathy. This is the feeling of empathy. And it was with me and my little sister. I won't be going into the depth of the conversation we had, but it was genuinely just on the basis that what we'd experienced as individuals and what we went through together was the same. It was equivalent. And when we talk to each other and we interact on that human level with the same feelings that we've had, we can make the feeling, the connection, and the empathy between each other because we understand what each other went through. And I feel like the weirder your situation and the harder your upbringing and the more emotional torment that you face in the past, the harder you find empathy, and the more difficult you can find it to be empathizing with other individuals on planet Earth. Saying that, I don't believe in the romanticizing of empathy. I think it's incredibly toxic, and for some reason, individuals commonly do have this obsession, this weird obsession, and maybe it's to feel different or to better understand their scarred pasts or their lack of emotional understanding. I find it very unhelpful, but very common, that individuals do have this weird obsession with self-diagnosis and also identifying with having certain mental disorders online without actually having an appropriate level of diagnosis. And I say all of this because empathy is one of the most valuable things you can have as a human being. It gives you the ultimate level of perspective and understanding, and it brings you the closest to humanity you can possibly come without actually being the human that you empathize to themselves. I would say that it's one of the most important things to understand the feeling of, and I have to say I have a suboptimal understanding of it at best. I say this because I believe that the current obsession with the concept of sociopathy, bypassing things like true crime and, the weird, perspectives some people have of serial killers and murderers and stuff like that online, and the romanticism that goes behind those individuals' antics and the idealization that some people have towards those individuals in spite of having horrible behaviors that they've committed, atrocities amongst humanity. I would say the two biggest variables for people self-identifying with having a lack of empathy and therefore appealing to the concept of sociopathy, even if they're not sociopaths, sociopathic tendencies. And when I say that just on the emotional basis, not on a behavioral basis, I would say it's to do with two things. And one is a poor upbringing where you have a difficult time relating to other individuals that surround you, as well as having a potentially traumatic past. And then at the same time, also being on the internet for too long and not connecting with human beings. And I say that because as much as I will never let my past define me, I know that it may have stunted my emotional state in this time. As much as I never let my past define me or to victimize myself about the past or make justifications for my poor perceptions and behavior because of the past, because this is the future and I can always act differently now even if I feel suboptimal, I would say that those are the two biggest variables, particularly upbringing, that drive a feeling and or a lack of feeling when it comes to things like empathy, emotion, and the caring for other individuals. Now, one interesting thing I always theorize about this is, why do you do it? Or why do you appeal to such things like a lack of empathy? And I have to say, I think it has something to do with the fact that perhaps it is easier to appeal to things like a lack of empathy than to actually work on your emotional development as an individual who has a traumatic past and may have more negative emotions or perceptions of individuals negatively than positive. And also saying that it's easier to take the path of least resistance when it comes to these kinds of things instead of understand that your lack of emotional understanding might make you weaker than not feeling anything at all. And it's kind of ironic because when it comes to intelligence, you'll have individuals who are incredibly intelligent but have a very poor comprehension of their emotional capacities and their emotional states. And that personally is what I've been told. I feel like I'm so emotionally stunted in many capacities, and yet I've been told I'm very intelligent. I would say there's this grand balance that people have an inappropriate perception of when it comes to things like intelligence. You can be incredibly intelligent, but emotionally incompetent. And that's what I personally feel like I am. Like, I feel like I am smart enough to get by, not smart enough to justify being smart, and not to say that I could never be more smart, because intelligence is based on a collective of information and understanding as well as skill sets that you develop over time. Personally, I would say that I'm not dumb by any stretch of the imagination. I'm not particularly smart in my mind. I've been told otherwise, but I never want to feed my ego or stop learning because I think I'm smart. But the one thing I think I'm completely incompetent with is my understanding of my emotions. And it could be justifiable in some capacity, or at least for me to say, this is why I have a problem with my emotions at the age of 24. Perhaps it's my upbringing, my lack of human interaction, or whatever the case is. But it doesn't justify my emotional incompetence. And I believe this is why some people just appeal their mental health issues to having some sort of mental health ailment instead of actually working on them through whatever therapies they require. The first thing I would say to do that is incredibly important regarding your understanding of your emotions is to understand that emotional incompetence or a lack of emotional intelligence or understanding of your emotions is not a good thing. You shouldn't look at your lack of empathy towards people as a strength, which I believe that after a point of trauma, We all look at our kinds of emotions or our lack of emotions like they're useful because we don't want to feel those things. But in reality, those things are what make us most human and most understanding of our circumstances. So when we shut those feelings down and or when we push them down, we usually fall into even worse habits. We have issues with our anger. We have issues with our sadness. We use substances to hide from the reality of our emotions. We also just can't connect properly with other individuals, or we come off as weird or awkward. And I'm saying you or me as in we, but in reality, I'm just generalizing entirely. And this is, again, not to act like I'm some sort of sociopath or psychopath or anything like that. And it's not to act edgy and kind of like be like, oh, I'm a sociopath, oh, I don't feel empathy. I'm very capable of feeling these emotions, and I think that a lot of people who try to associate with being somewhat sociopathic also have this same ability. I just feel like to defend ourselves, it's easier to take the path of least resistance and act like sociopaths or like we are not empathetic at all because we can't comprehend the emotions properly. And I think this is a very important thing that we as individuals need to look in on ourselves on and to actually assess what emotions we truly understand and what emotions we know we can feel and also what emotions we don't understand. Because I think that a lot of people who associate, not that are diagnosed, but associate with being mentally disordered in some capacity or have a lack of emotional ability just don't have an understanding or a good grasp or a good utilization of their emotions. And I know this is a very weird conversation to have, but it's something that's really been bothering me lately because when I was younger, for some reason, and I wasn't even that young at the time, this was probably only like 6, 7 years ago when I was coming out of high school, people even then thought it was so cool to associate as being kind of a sociopath or not caring or all this stuff. And it just makes you such a weak individual in regards to you not being able to have a human connection with individuals or understand your emotions. It's so easy, again, in my opinion, to take the path of least resistance and to not act emotional and to close off your emotions and to not feel your emotions or not let yourself feel your emotions because you're either worried about getting hurt or you just don't understand them, you don't know how to deal with them, you use things to hide from them, you try to act like you're a sociopath to justify how you don't understand your emotions or how you might be emotionally unintelligent. Like, I've been told that I'm smart, but personally, I don't think I'm very smart, and I think that I can work on a lot of things, one being my comprehension of emotions. And do pardon, the dogs are hanging out and chewing stuff, so if you hear any crunching or whatever. And also, the apartment right now is like 85 degrees, so I'm sweating all over the place. I have the windows open, so pardon that as well if you hear cars and all that crap. Anyways, the gist of what I'm trying to explain is I suspect something to do with people at young ages particularly having an obsession with identifying with particularly sociopathy is not just to be edgy and cool, it's because they actually have a genuine fear of facing their emotions and having human connection, because that makes them, in their eyes, weak, when in reality, it can actually make you a much stronger individual. Personally, having good control and understanding of your emotions and your emotional weaknesses is not something you should demonize or look poorly upon. Is something that you really need as an adult. It makes you go from being a child to an adult. And this is why I also think when adults kind of have a childish mindset, it's because they haven't had time, perhaps in some cases, to adapt to their emotions and understand their emotions and how they feel and understand how to use their feelings to be more mature. The concept of maturity isn't just based on making money or doing good in life, having a good job, being intelligent. It's about being emotionally competent and understanding of your circumstances. And I think this is something that a lot of people just don't understand or they leave out. And I'm not acting like I know anything about emotional competence. I'm actually incredibly incompetent when it comes to my emotions, and this is why I'm talking about it now. You know, delving into the depths of the internet and looking at the most disgusting and depraved things of humanity, and also now being exposed to the real world after leaving Canada and having complete isolation for a series of years, has made me reflect on how emotionally stunted I think I truly am, and how I don't want to be, because feeling emotions, whether they're positive or negative, is a genuinely important thing for the development of my mind and of most people's minds. And I feel like nowadays we just use substances, any kinds of substances, or we use, emotional closing off, or we isolate ourselves to hide from our emotions. And I feel like it just makes us weak. We can't appropriate ourselves in society as a result of such, and then we become incredibly weak. And maybe we act like we're strong, like we act like we can't empathize with people because we fear the feelings that might come with empathy. The pain, the suffering, the pleasure, the hope, and the human connection that comes with that, which can expose you to being weak to that individual. And I'm saying all of this because what's the solution? Exposure, which is something a lot of us don't let ourselves have. Being exposed emotionally to people, and to understand your emotions, and to understand the emotions that you can feel and that you know which emotions are which, is incredibly important. And I feel like a lot of us can't do that, even as adults nowadays. Like, one thing I've found to be particularly helpful, and this might be stupid, like, I don't really go to therapy or anything like that, so I'm sorry if this is just a common therapy tactic, but one thing I've personally found to be incredibly helpful for my emotional development is just to look at how I'm feeling in the moment and try and figure out what this emotion is. And recently I've been doing this a lot more, and I found myself to become more competent as a result. And the things I'm feeling, like, say I'm really, stressed out and I'm freaking out about something, or I'm, like, really jittery and I'm screwed up, I'm like, is this stress? Is this anxiety? Is this anger? Is this happiness? Like, what is it? And you continually do that until you find out what you're feeling in the moment. Then you can use basic tactics or other means to help dissuade or kind of work through those emotions. It's easy online to find this is how you help lower anxiety in your mind. This is how you help lower depression in your mind. This is how you do this. This is how you feel happier, blah, blah. But if you can't even figure out what emotions you're feeling in the moment, how can you actually figure out how to fix the emotions that you're feeling? Or how to move past the emotions that you're feeling? And again, I feel like this all comes down to a lack of wanting to feel emotions. This is why you have so many people online identifying as sociopaths when they haven't even been to a therapist or anything like that. And this is also why edgy teenagers don't want to feel anything. And this is also why everybody's using substances all the time to hide from the things they feel or to deal with the stresses of life. It's not because you just had a bad shift. It's also because maybe this coworker you've been flirting with doesn't want to interact with you. Or maybe it's because your boss is mad at you for something you did and you're looking in on yourself feeling like you're incompetent. And instead of moving past this and striving for better, you feel like appealing to futility and also just drinking yourself into a stupor or doing a little bit of something else. I think this is why we have so many issues as humans when it comes to things like substance abuse and mental health issues or disorders. And it's not to say that this is the cause of all mental health issues. I'm just saying I feel like we become so emotionally unwell because we just don't understand what our emotions are. So I really do recommend, whether you need therapy or not, or whether you want therapy, to just look in on your emotions and do like a mental assessment of how you're feeling in a moment and try and understand what you're feeling. Because if you can do that, it's the first step to developing as a human and also figuring out the next step to moving through those emotions and figuring out how to develop appropriately as an individual in society, and then you become an even more competent member. Think about this. Say you're really smart. You might think you're smart or you might think you're not. But say you're really smart but you're emotionally incompetent, you're basically as useless as any other human on earth who's foolish. You act foolishly even if you have intelligence. This is something I've learned over the course of time, and this is why I really don't care if I'm smart or if I'm stupid. I can endeavor to learn as much as possible, but if I can't act appropriately in society, or if I can't understand my own emotional, comprehension of things, or if I can't comprehend how I feel, then I'm basically useless. I'm like an animal. I'm definitely not human, or I'm not worthy of being human, even if I'm given a human body and a human mind and a functional human brain, because I'm not using everything I have to my potential. So I get this is an odd video, but it's just, this is something that's been really bothering me lately because it stems to our emotional misunderstandings. And it's not even about other people that surround us. It's about ourselves. It's about how we feel about ourselves, how we deal with the things we feel within ourselves, and how we can overcome these things. But we can't because we don't even understand what the things we're feeling are. We can overcome these things if we know what they are. But if we don't know what they are, then we don't know what we're fighting. We don't know what we're fighting for, what we're moving through, what we're doing with ourselves, how we deal with ourselves. Which is why I think some people need therapy and find therapy to be also so incredibly useful. It's when you're looking at yourself, you might be in denial about how you feel about yourself. You might be misunderstanding how you feel about yourself, and having somebody else guide you through what you're feeling can help you understand what you're feeling so that you can work through it. But if you don't know what you're fighting, or you don't know how to cope with whatever you're feeling, and you don't even know what you're feeling to begin with, I think that's the most difficult thing about it. And again, it's like this is not something I really hear a lot of people talk about. It's so minute, it's almost infantile. It's like your parent telling you, you're feeling angry right now, you're feeling scared. But I don't really feel like a lot of people talk about this online. And so it's really been bothering me. I really want to talk about it, but the number one thing I really want to push is really understanding your emotions is the first step to becoming superior over your mind when you face something like some level of emotional unwellness or some level of anxiety or stress or fear or anger. It gives you more of an ability to work with your emotions instead of, have to try and do crazy stuff to try and hide from them. So anyways, that's the video. I know it's stupid sounding, but this is something that I really wanted to talk about because it might spark something in your minds, and it might give you some ideas on the first steps to working above what you're currently at with your emotional capacities, because I found it to be particularly helpful with myself. When I look at how I'm feeling and I try and figure out just what I'm feeling, it's the number one step for me to figure out how I can move through that emotion and also how I can become a more positive individual as a result, and how I can also learn to control my emotions better. So that was the video. I hope you did find it helpful, and if you didn't, then pardon such. There'll be another video for you somewhere else on the internet or somewhere else on this channel. So anyways, thank you so much for watching, my people. I hope you all enjoyed, and tell me what you think in the comments below. I will see you next time, and I hope you all enjoyed. Slater.